Hello, students. I am here again in my ninth lecture. As promised earlier, we will have the revision of first unit. So here I am again with my ninth lecture on the subject surveying. So starting with the basics of surveying, definition of surveying states that it is an art of measuring distances, angles, and positions on or near the surface of the earth. So the point can be on the ground, above the ground, or on the surface of the ground. So why it is an art? Because only a surveyor who possesses through understanding of surveying techniques will be able to determine the most efficient methods required to obtain optimal results over a wide variety of surveying problems. Not a layman can perform a survey, but a professional from the basic can perform the survey tasks. Now, coming on to the principles of surveying, there are two principles of surveying. The first is location of a point by measurement from 2 points of reference. It states that according to this principle, the relative position of a point to be surveyed should be located by measurement from at least 2 points of reference. This is the most important point, that at least 2 points of reference should be there to locate the position of the third point. The next principle is working from whole to part. According to this principle, it is always desirable to carry out survey work from whole to part. This means when an area is to be surveyed, first a system of control point is to be established covering the whole area with very high precision. Then minor details are located by less precise work. So the main idea to work like this is to prevent the accumulation of errors and to control and localize minor errors which otherwise would expand to greater magnitudes. If the reverse process is followed, then the work will be uncontrolled in the end. So there are two basic principles of surveying. The first is location of a point by measurement from 2 points of reference, and the second one is working from whole to part. Now, there are two primary types of surveying. First is the plane survey, and other is the geodetic survey. When the survey is uh, for a small area, which is less than 250 kilometers square, in that case, we perform plane survey where the surface or the curvature of the earth is not taken into account. But when the survey is performed at a very high level, then like for area more than 250 kilometers square, in that case, the curvature of the earth will come into act. So this is the major difference between the both. Generally, question is asked for the differentiation of plane and geodetic surveying in your semester exams. So you will have to list the following points. The Earth's surface is considered as plane surface for plane surveying, and the surface of the Earth is considered as curved surface for geodetic surveying. The curvature of the Earth is ignored in plane surveying, while the curvature of the Earth is taken into account for geodetic surveying. Line joining any 2 points is considered to be straight in plane surveying, and the line joining any two stations is considered as spherical in geodetic surveying. The triangle formed by any 3 points is considered as plane in plane surveying, and the triangle formed by any 3 points is considered as spherical in geodetic surveying. The angles of triangle are considered as plane angles, and the angles of triangle are considered as spherical angles in geodetic surveying. The area for plane surveying should be less than 250 kilometers square, while for geodetic surveying, the area carried out will be more than 250 kilometers square. Now, classification of surveying is done on the basis of 3 points, which are the nature of the field of survey, the object of the survey, and the instrument of survey used. Coming on to the surveying based on the nature of survey, it is the topographical survey, the hydrographic survey, the astronomical survey, engineering survey, archaeological survey, and the aerial survey. Whereas the surveying based on the type of instruments are chain surveying, compass surveying, table surveying, theodolite surveying, and tachymetric surveying. Now, since we perform these surveys manually, there are chances of error in it. So there can be three main sources of error. The first is the instrumental error, in which surveying error may arise due to imperfection or faulty adjustment of the instrument with which the measurement is being taken. For example, may be too long, or the angle of measuring instrument may be out of the adjustment. Here in the figure you can see that there are two different instruments, the weighing machines having the same weight of weights of 100 gram, but both the instruments are showing different values. One is showing 100.3 grams while the other is showing 100 grams. So one of these machines is wrong, the one which is showing 100.3 is wrong. So there may be a fault in the device due to the calibration or any other reason. So it comes under the category of instrumental error. Second one is the personal error. Error may also arise due to want of perfection of human sight in observing and of touch in manipulating instruments. Human can read the same reading from different angles. So one of them angles are correct, rest others are incorrect. So they may get different readings for the same survey work conducted. The last is the natural error, which is not in our hand. We cannot stop them, but we can make corrections to it. Errors in surveying may also be due to the variation in natural phenomena such as temperature, humidity, gravity, wind, refraction, and magnetic declination. If they are not properly observed while taking measurement, these results will be incorrect. So there are different types of error also. These errors are mistakes, accidental errors, and systematic or cumulative errors. Mistakes are errors which arise from inattention, inexperience, carelessness, and poor judgment or confusion in the mind of the observer. They do not follow any mathematical rule and may be large or small, positive or negative. They cannot be measured. However, they can be detected by repeating the whole operation. If a mistake is undetected, it produces a serious effect upon the final result. Hence, every value to be recorded in the field must be checked by some independent field observation. The example has been given that a person can read 69 instead of 96. So second error is the systematic or cumulative error. A systematic or cumulative error is an error that under the same condition will always be of the same size and sign. A systematic error always follows some definite mathematical or physical law, and correction can be determined and applied. Such errors are of constant character and are regarded as positive or negative according as they make the result great or small. Their effect is therefore cumulative. Example is given. The systematic errors may arise due to variation of temperature, humidity, pressure, current velocity, curvature, fraction, etc. Whereas faulty setting or improper leveling of an instrument also comes into the play. The last is the accidental error. Accidental errors can occur due to unavoidable circumstances like variation in atmospheric conditions, which are entirely beyond the control of the observer. Errors in surveying due to imperfection in measuring instruments and even imperfection of eyesight fall in this category. They may be positive or negative in nature. Now, coming on to the theory of probability, there may be some error while performing the survey. There is always a probability, the mathematical calculation of the chances that error have been done. So there is the observation, mathematical observations. We can use the formula for single or mean number of observations. For single observation of error, the formula is given as plus minus 0.6745 under root summation of v square upon n minus 1, where v is the difference between any single observation and the mean of the series, and n is the number of observation. Talking about the mean of the number of observation, the error which have been committed, it will be equal to plus minus 0.6745 under root summation of v square upon n into n minus 1. Now the formula is almost the same. There is just a difference of 1 divided by under root n. So EM will can also be written as ES divided by under root n, where ES is the probable error of single observation, V is the difference between single observation and the mean of the series, EM is the probable error of the mean, and n is the number of observations in the series. You will get to know it more clear, and your concept will get developed once you go through these numericals. These have been discussed in the class. You can go through it. Now, accuracy and precision are similar terms, but they are not the same. So sometimes in your semester exam, the difference between accuracy and precision have been asked. So if it comes, you have to write that accuracy is closeness with the true value of the quantity being measured, while precision is the measure of reproducibility of the measurement. Accuracy of measurement means conformity to the truth, while the term precise means clearly or sharply defined. Accuracy can be improved, precision cannot be improved. Accuracy depends upon simple technique of analysis, whereas precision depends upon many factors and required so many sophisticated techniques of analysis. Accuracy is necessary but not sufficient condition for precision, while precision is necessary but not a sufficient condition for accuracy. Now there are four main scales, which some of which you have already studied in your 10 plus 2 level. The scales are plane scale, diagonal scale, vernier scale, and scale of chords. Starting with the plane scale, with plane scale it becomes easier to measure two dimensions only. Hence measurements like units and lengths, meters and decimeters, etc. Is a unitless relation between one unit on the map and however many units of the same. We relate the unit on ground with the same unit on the map. An RF of 1 is to 24,000 means 1 inch of the map equals 24,000 inches on the ground, and 1 centimeter on the ground equals 24,000 centimeters on the ground. Now this is a table of examples showing how you calculate the representative fractions. Taking an example of designation A with 50 centimeter to a meter, there are 100 centimeters in a meter. So 50 centimeter divided by a meter will mean 50 centimeter divided by 100 centimeter, which is 1 by 2. So this is how you calculate the representative fraction. Coming on to the diagonal scale, by applying diagonal scale, it becomes simpler to calculate three dimensions like meters, decimeters, and centimeters, unit, tens, hundreds, yards, feet, and inches. A short length is segregated into number of parts by applying the standard of similar triangle under which sides are symmetrical. So you just apply the principle of similarity of triangles, and you can find out different units with the help of this scale. Now coming on to the vernier scale, this device is mostly applied for estimating the fractional part of one of the minimal divisions concerning a graduated scale. It is generally comprised of a small auxiliary scale which slides alongside of on the main scale. Now, minimum count or the least count of the vernier is equal to the variance amongst smallest division of the main scale and smallest division on the vernier scale. The last scale is the scale of chords, a graduated scale on which are given the lengths of the chord of arc from 0 to 90 degree in a circle of given radius, used in measuring given angles and in plotting angles of given number of degrees. Now, the error due to use of wrong angles. If the length of a line existing on a plan or a map is determined by the means of measurement with a wrong scale, the length so obtained will be incorrect. The true or correct length of the line can be given as RF of wrong scale divided by RF of correct scale into the measured length. Similarly, if the area of the map is calculated with the help of using wrong scale, the correct area can be calculated by using the formula RF of wrong scale divided by RF of correct scale whole square into calculated area. This will be more clear if you go through this example. The same formula has been used here. So you will get to know how to apply the formula in a given question. Now, there are basically two types of measurements in surveying. The first is a linear measurement, and the other is the angular measurement. Talking about the linear measurement first, the determination of the distance between 2 points on the surface of the earth is one of the basic operation of surveying. Measurement of horizontal distances or measuring linear measurements is required in chain surveying, transverse surveying, and other types of surveying. Measuring tapes. Tapes are used in measuring to take linear measurements. They are available in different lengths and can be made of different materials. Now, depending upon the type of material they are made up of, they are categorized as linen tape, metallic tape, steel tape, synthetic tape, and invert tape. Now, talking about the linen tape, also known as the cloth tape, is a varnish tape made of closely woven linen. The width of the strip is about 12 to 16 mm. It is available in different lengths such as 10, 20, 30, and 50 meters. Both ends of the linen tape are provided with metallic handles, and the whole tape is wounded in leather or metal case. Linen tapes are light in weight and easy to handle. These tapes may shrink when exposed to water and also elongated when pulled. Hence, these tapes are not suitable for accurate surveying measurements. These are generally used for measuring offsets and for ordinary works. Coming on to the metallic tapes, the metallic woven tape is an improvement or improved version of the linen tape. Brass or copper made wires are used as reinforcement for the linen material, hence, it is more durable than normal linen tape. A brass ring is provided at the end of the tape, which is included in the length of the tape. These tapes are available in different lengths of 2 meter, 10 meter, 15 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter, and 50 meter. These are used for survey works such as topographical survey works, where minor errors are not taken into consideration. Coming on to the steel tape. A steel tape is made of steel or stainless steel. It consists of a steel strip of 6 mm to 16 mm wide. It is available in length of 1 meter, 5 meter, 8 meter, 10 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter, and 50 meters. Meters, decimeters, and centimeters are graduated in the steel strip. Steel tapes generally come up with a metal case with automatic winding device. The tape is withdrawn from the case by using a hand during measuring it and is rewounded into the case by just pressing the button provided on the case. Steel tapes are not flexible and are suitable for measuring leveled surfaces only. They may corrode easily when exposed to the moisture, and to prevent this tape, it should be cleaned and oiled after every use. These tapes are generally used for standardizing chains, measurement of construction work, etc. Now comes the synthetic tape. These are made up of glass fibers coated with PVC. These are lightweight and are flexible. They are available in lengths of 5 meter, 10 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter, and 50 meters. Synthetic tapes may stretch when subjected to tension, and these are not suitable for accurate surveying works. However, synthetic tapes are recommended in place of steel tapes where it is essential to make measurements in the vicinity of electric fences and railway lines. Coming on to the last tape, which is the invert tape. These are made up of alloy, which consists of 36% of nickel and 64% of steel. Invert tape consists of 6 mm wide strip and is available in different lengths of 30, 50, and 100 meters. The coefficient of thermal expansion of invert alloy is very low. It is not affected by the changes in temperature. Hence, these tapes are used for high precision works in surveying such as baseline measurements, triangulation surveys, etc. Invert tapes are expensive than all other types of tapes. These tapes should be used, and these must be handled with care, otherwise bend or kink may be formed. Various corrections are provided to the tapes. The corrections may be correction for absolute length, correction for pull or tension, correction for temperature, correction for sag, correction for slope, correction for alignment, reduction of for sea level. Now comes chain for the linear measurement. Chains are the measuring instruments used in surveying, formed by 100 links of 4 mm galvanized mild steel wire. These links are joined by three circular or oval wire rings. These rings provide the flexibility to the chains. Every aspect of the life requires some measuring units. Measurements are used to do the work precisely and accurately. Let it be from kitchen to office, every measurement are used. So, as in engineering, calculation or measurement holds a very great role in construction or surveying or any other aspect. There are various units of measurements such as meters, centimeters, feet, inches, acres, yards, and the list goes on. Same as units, there are various instruments used in the measurement of any entity. One of the instrument used is the in the measurement are the chain. So this is what chain looks like. You have two brass handles, and the size of the chain is engraved on these handles. And you have tallies, which shows since you don't have any graduation on the chain, you cannot read it directly. So tallies are provided for to avoid any kind of confusion. uh, these chains are connected to each other with the help of links. So there are many types of chains depending upon their lengths. uh, there are metric chains, steel band or band chains, Gunter's chain, engineer chain, and revenue chains. Coming on to the metric chains are the most commonly used chain in India. These types of chains come in many lengths, such as 5, 10, 20, and 30 meters. Most commonly used is a 20-meter chain. Tallies are provided at every 2 to 5 meter of the chain for quick reading. Every link of this type of chain is 0.2 meter, that is 20 centimeter. The total length of the chain is marked on the brass handle at the ends. This is how the metric chain looks like. Now coming on to the steel band, these types of chain consist of a long narrow strip of steel of uniform width of 12 to 16 mm and thickness of 0.3 to 0.6 mm. This chain is divided by brass studs at every 20 centimeter, or instead of brass studs, band chain may have graduated engraving as centimeters. For easy use of workability, are mounted on steel crosses or metal reels from which they can be easily unrolled. These steel bands are available in 20-meter and 30-meter length and the width of about 12 to 16 mm. Now the Gunter's chain, it comes with a standard 66 feet length. These chains consist of 100 links, each link being 0.66 feet long or 7.92 inches long. The length is 66 feet, and it is selected because it is convenient in land measurements. Coming on to the engineer's chain, this chain comes in 100-foot length. It consists of 100 links, each link being 1 foot long. At every 10 link, a brass ring or tags are provided for indication of 10 links. Reading are taken in feet and decimals. Last is the revenue chain. The standard size of this type of chain is 33 feet. The number of links are 16, each link being 2 feet. This chain is commonly used in cadastral survey. Now, since you use chain in surveying, due to the elongation or variation in temperature, the length of the chain may get affected. So, you perform the test with the help of test gauge. It looks something like the slide in front of you. Uh, 20 by 20 centimeter dressed stones are used just to check the length of the chain. Markings are done there. Incorrect chain in surveying, error and correction. If the chain that is employed for measuring length is not equal to the true length, then the length measured won't be correct. This measurement hence requires correction. A chain that is very long gives a distance that is lesser in value. This means the error is negative and the correction is positive. A chain that is short gives larger distance value. In this case, the error is positive and the correction is negative. Now, the correction which you apply to length, area, and volume are as follows. Small l is equal to L dash into capital L dash divided by capital L. Area will be equal to the true area will be equal to 1 plus 2 into E times the wrong area, and the correct volume will be equal to 1 plus 3 into E times the wrong volume. So the idea about the change in the length or the variation in the length of the chain can be done on the basis of these numericals. Just go through them. I have discussed it in my lectures, so kindly go through them. Now coming on to the errors in chain, the error can be due to the erroneous length of the chain. It can be due to the bad ranging, careless holding and marking, bad straightening, non-horizontality, sag in chain, variation in temperature, variation in pull, and personal mistakes. Now, the second thing which we do in survey is we calculate the bearing and angles after doing the linear measurements. A survey line can be measured with relation to the other survey line or with relation to the meridian. The first method gives you the angle between the line and the second gives the bearing. Hence, the bearing can be defined as the direction of the line with respect to the given meridian. There are mainly three types of meridian. First is a true meridian, second is a magnetic meridian, and third is arbitrary meridian. Now, the first is the true meridian. It is just the line joining the true geographic north and south. The line joining the true geographic north and south pole is the true meridian. When a magnet is suspended freely in the atmosphere, it will always show a north-south direction, and the line joining the magnetic north and south, the magnetic north and magnetic south, will be the magnetic meridian. In some cases, you may not know the magnetic meridian or the geographical or the true meridian. In that case, you just select any permanent mark as your arbitrary meridian. So these are the three types of meridian. In the figure, you can see the line joining the true north and true south, or the geographic north and south, are known as true meridian, while the line joining the magnetic north and magnetic south is the magnetic meridian. The angle between the survey line and the true meridian will be true bearing, and the angle between the survey line and the magnetic meridian will be termed as magnetic bearing. Now, there are two types of system to calculate the bearings. One is the whole circle bearing and other is the quadrantal or reduced bearing. So coming on to the whole circle bearing, the WCB method measures angle from magnetic north in the clockwise direction, and the value of the bearing varies from 0 to 360 degree. You just have to measure the angle always from and in clockwise direction. The range will be from 0 to 360 degree. You never. But in the case of quadrantal bearing, the bearing is measured either from north or from south, whichever is nearer to the survey line. Achha, this can be measured in clockwise or anti-clockwise direction depending upon which part is near. So the range of this bearing system will be from 0 to 90 degree. Coming on to the latitudes, latitudes are the line, the latitude of a line is its projection on the north-south meridian and is equal to the length of the line times the cosine of its bearing, while the departure of a line is its projection on the east-west meridian and is equal to the length of the line times the sine of its bearing. The formulas are in front of you. Now, coming on to the features of magnetic compass. Magnetic compass consists of a magnetic needle, line of sight, graduated circle, and a compass box. The purpose of the magnetic needle is to establish the magnetic meridian. A line of sight helps to sight the other end of the survey line through the compass. A graduated circle is employed to read the directions of the line. It can be attached either to the box or to the needle. In order to house the above parts, a compass box is used. The whole housing is then supported by means of a tripod or a suitable stand. Now, there are two types of compass which we use in survey. The first is a prismatic compass and second is the surveyor compass. The question mainly asked in exam is the difference between surveyor compass and prismatic compass. So the needle is of edge bar type and also acts as an index for surveyor compass. while the needle is broad needle type but does not act as an index in prismatic compass. The graduation ring is attached to the box and not to the needle in surveyor compass, while the graduated ring is attached with the needle in prismatic compass. The graduations are in quadrantal bearing system, having the range of 0 degree to 90 degree in surveyor compass. While talking about the prismatic compass, the graduations are in full circle bearing system from 0 to 360 degree. The readings are taken directly by seeing through the top of the glass in surveyor compass, and in prismatic compass, the readings are taken with the help of prism provided at the isolate. In surveyor compass, sighting and reading cannot be done simultaneously from one position of the observer, while in prismatic compass, the sighting and reading can be simultaneously done from one position of the observer. The instrument cannot be used without a tripod for surveyor compass, while the instrument can be used without a tripod for prismatic compass. These numerical shows a concept of conversion of whole circle bearing to the quadrantal bearing and quadrantal bearing to whole circle bearing. Just go through the numericals once. It also helps you to detect the local attraction and how you correct the readings after finding out the local attraction. Now coming on to an instrument which is a manual instrument, and it just uh, measures the horizontal and vertical angles directly, and the vertical angle can be calculated indirectly. So the theodolite is an instrument used in surveying to measure horizontal and vertical angles. It is also used for leveling, indirect measure of distances and prolonging of a line, etc. The line of sight of theodolite can be rotated through 180 degree in vertical plane about its horizontal axis. Theodolite has many parts which need to be adjusted every time while surveying. It is important to know about theodolite parts and their functions before using it to minimize errors during theodolite surveying. So here is a cross section of a theodolite. Various parts of theodolite are telescope, vertical circle, index frame, the standards, the upper plate, the lower plate, the leveling head, the shifting, plate level, tripod, plumb bob, and magnetic compass. They all serve different purposes which have already been taught in the class. Now, there are also some terms which you need to know. I will only name them. If you have any confusion regarding the terms, you may refer to the class lectures. Now, some terms are axis, horizontal axis, line of sight, line of collimation, axis of level tube, centering, transiting, swinging the telescope, face left observation, face right observation, telescope normal, telescope inverted, and changing phase. Uh, some adjustment are needed before the conduction of survey for theodolite. These are known as temporary adjustment. Centering is done with the help of plumb bob. Leveling adjustment of the theodolite is done using leveling screws or foot screws. The objective of leveling is to in surveying is to make the vertical axis of the instrument truly vertical. Now, an error of is eliminated. It is a kind of focusing error. So it can be eliminated by focusing the eyepiece for a clear vision, or it can be done by focusing the objective to bring the image of the object in the plane of crosshairs. So these were the temporary adjustments. Coming on to the permanent adjustments, the first permanent adjustment of the theodolite is the plate level adjustment. Plate level adjustment is done for making the axis of plate bubble perpendicular to the vertical axis when the bubble is central. Second is the alignment of the line of sight. It should be perfectly horizontal. Next is the adjustment of the horizontal axis, and the last is adjustment of the altitude level or vertical index frame by using tangent screws. So how you measure horizontal angles? After the temporary adjustment of the theodolite, the telescope is located at a point from which we must focus the other points to find out the horizontal angle between them. Let us say A, B, and C are the 3 points of the same on the same ground level with some distances. So the procedure will be the instrument is located at point B with all temporary adjustments, and ranging rods are located at point A and C. You are at B, the ranging rods are at C and A. Now set the vernier A reading to 0 and vernier B reading to 180 by rotating telescope. This should be done by releasing the upper clamp screw and tightening of the lower clamp screw. After setting the vernier, tighten the upper clamp screw and check the reading without any error with the help of upper tangent screw. Whenever the upper clamp is tightly fixed, loosen the lower clamp screw. It will allow the telescope to turn without any change in the reading. Now focus the ranging rod at location A and bisect it. After bisecting A, release the upper clamp screw and rotate the telescope in clockwise direction towards the ranging rod at C and bisect it. Now observe the vernier reading, which will be horizontal angle between A and C, or angle ABC. In the above explained case, the vertical circle is presented left side of the telescope. Then repeat the same procedure with the vertical circle right side of the telescope. The average value of the angle obtained in the face left and face right conditions give more accurate value of horizontal angle. Now, how do you measure this vertical angle? After the temporary adjustment of the theodolite, set the vernier reading of the vertical circle to 0 using clamp screws and focus it to C. Please refer the figure in front of you. Center the bevel using put screw without any collimation error. These raise the telescope slowly. Then raise the telescope slowly towards point A as shown in the figure. Bisect the point A and note down the vernier reading angle AOC. Similarly, bisect the point B from C, after which it will give an angle BOC. Now you can compute the angle AOB by adding both of them. Conduct the procedure in both face left and face right conditions, and then the average value is considered as accurate vertical angle. Now coming on to the last part of this unit, which is the electronic distance measurement instrument. Electronic distance measuring instrument is a surveying instrument for measuring distance electronically between 2 points through electromagnetic waves. Electronic distance measurement is generally it is a term used as a method for distance measurement by electronic means. In this method, instruments are used to measure distance that rely on propagation, reflection, and reception of electromagnetic waves like radio waves, visible light, and infrared. As years past, technology has improved drastically. At present, we have modern EDMs that display distance in digital form, and many gains microcomputers that calculates horizontal and vertical distances and also calculate the sloped distance. Electronic distance measurement equipments are incorporated along with theodolites that possess automatic angle uh, readout called as total stations, also called as field to finish systems. These record distance and angles uh, simultaneously. So, depending upon the type of waves used in the instruments, the EDMs are of three types. First is the microwave instrument, other is the infrared wave instrument, and the last one is the light wave instrument. Talking about the total station, it is just the combination of electromagnetic distance measuring instrument and electronic theodolite. When we combine both of them, it is known as total station. It performs all the tasks which we have studied till now. It performs more tasks which we have not covered till yet. So we will cover them in some next units. So as it performs many functions, hence it is known as total station. So it is a single apparatus which can perform the task of different apparatuses. That is why it is known as total station. It is also integrated with microprocessors, electronic data collectors, and storage systems. The instrument can be used to measure horizontal and vertical angles as well as sloping distance of the object to the instruments. Some components of the total stations have been shown to you in the figure. You have the handle securing screw, data input output terminal, instrument height mark, battery cover, operation panel, tri-branch clamp, base plate, leveling foot screw, circular level adjusting screw, circular level display, objective lens, tubular compass slot, optical plummet, focusing ring, optical plummet rectile cover, optical plummet eyepiece, horizontal clamp, horizontal fine motion screw, data input output connector, plate level external power source connector, plate level adjusting screw, vertical clamp, vertical fine motion screw, telescope eyepiece, telescope focusing ring, peep sight, and instrument center mark. So these are few of the components of the total station which you use. Now the advantages of using a total station is the field work is carried out very fast, the time is saved, accuracy of the measurement is high since very less manual work or task is included in the complete procedure. Manual errors involved in reading and recordings are eliminated since it is directly displayed on the TFT screen you have in front of you, which is attached to the total station. Calculation of coordinates is very fast and accurate. Even correction for temperature and pressure are automatically made. Computers can be employed for map making and plotting contours and cross sections. Contour intervals and scales can be changed in no time. Now, talking about the disadvantages of using total stations, it is a battery operated equipment. Hence, in case you don't have a charged battery, you may not perform the survey. You need skilled operator for performing the task. You need a skilled operator, and it is costlier than other surveying instruments since it performs all the tasks which you have studied till now. So yes, the equipment is costly. So these are its disadvantages. So I have tried to cover most of the topics from Unit 1 in the revision. I hope this will be helpful to you in your exams. We will start the next unit from the next lecture. Uh, so that's now from my side today. We will start the next unit from the next term. So that's all for the day. Thank you, class.